Step back, two-pointer, puts it up, too strong. Rebound, Bridges tips it out to Crowder. Bucker for three. DeAndre ate the rebound. Paul for three. Bang! Middle to the drive, blocked by Ayton, saved by Bridges. Soundstripe.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. It is an emergency episode number 26, and it's a solo pod for your host Tyler King today. Here as always, talking hoops in the Mountain Time Zone here from my location here in Denver. But we were talking about the Phoenix Suns like we did 2 days ago. Had my guy Eric Ruby on from PHNX. Does all the Suns and all the Arizona State stuff for those guys. It was a great conversation. I apologize that it didn't have much of a shelf life, although I kind of thought that might happen given how much we talked about the Kevin Durant trade. But we also talked about Jordan Ott, the new head coach in Phoenix, and kind of his first impressions and all that he's going to have to do in his first year as he looks to right the ship there in Phoenix. We also talked about some draft guys as well, and we talked about some options at number 10, which I'll go over again today, kind of assuming that if Kevin Durant got traded to the Rockets, the number 10 pick would be included in that package, which it was, or the number 14 pick from San Antonio, although it seemed like they weren't really heavily involved in any of the trade discussions, despite being one of KD's preferred destinations. So we'll go over all of it today. It is, like I said, it's an emergency episode, and I'll have another episode tomorrow on Monday talking about Utah, the running Utes, and getting back into college basketball before we get ready to cover the NBA draft on Wednesday night as well, and Thursday with the second round too, now that Phoenix has another pick at their disposal. So obviously a very big day in Phoenix, despite recording this about an hour or so, I think, before, or maybe an hour and a half before Game 7 of the NBA Finals, which is what everyone should be focusing on, despite the NBA offseason never really, or the rumor mill and the trades never really stopping. This is what this is what everyone's trying to get to is to play for a championship, and it should be a great Game 7 tonight, which I'm sure everybody who's listening to this by the time you already know the outcome. So hopefully it was a great game, which was all anybody can ask for, it's been a great series so far. That's for sure. And I've enjoyed it. But here in the Mountain Time Zone, we've got to talk about our teams here. And that includes the Phoenix Suns and Kevin Durant, who has been traded to the Houston Rockets for Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and the number 10 pick in Wednesday's draft, like I mentioned. And it's just a very underwhelming trade for Phoenix, if I'm going to be honest. Eric and I talked about some of the options and what Phoenix should be looking back for in return for KD, who, despite being 37 years old and is going to need to be paid likely by Houston, a 2-year, $112-ish million extension at some point this offseason as he enters the last year of his previous contract extension. So it's a great fit for Houston, that's for sure. And I think it was a great trade for the Rockets, but for Phoenix, it's just really underwhelming. I'm not going to say it's a disaster trade because the scenario in Phoenix is a disaster, but this trade itself, I don't think is a disaster because of, I don't really know who Houston was bidding against. Obviously, the report came out last week that KD really only wanted to go to 3 teams, and that was Houston, San Antonio, and the Miami Heat as well, who apparently weren't willing to part with any of their decent young players and solid picks in a Kevin Durant trade. So it seems like they were not really heavily involved at all. And like I said, there was also some reporting that San Antonio wasn't really involved at all. So that just kind of left Houston, unless Phoenix was going to go not back on their word, but kind of go against KD's wishes and send him to someone like Minnesota, which maybe could have brought a better return in terms of current players, and just a better return in general, because I just don't really like the return. You're getting a number 10 pick, the number 10 pick back, which could be a very, very good pick. And I will go over 4 different guys I think Phoenix should target at number 10 on Wednesday night. But it's one of Phoenix's picks. It's their pick. They're getting their own pick back that they had given up in the original KD trade that they had given up to Brooklyn, who last summer sent those picks to Houston in exchange for their own picks back after they traded Mikal Bridges to the Knicks for 5 first-round picks. And I just don't like Jalen Green. I don't think Eric Ruby and I talked about this the other day. We don't think he's a very good player. I described him as a 23-year-old version of current Bradley Beal. I'm not saying he's similar to what Bradley Beal was at 23. I'm saying he is now what Bradley Beal is at his age. Bradley Beal is what 30, 31 years old, and is on easily the worst contract in the NBA. I just don't think he fits well with Phoenix, and I don't think he's a very good player overall. Not very. I just don't think he's a player that contributes to winning. If you look at any of the advanced lineup metrics for Houston last year, they were just simply better when he wasn't on the court, and they had a very deep roster that didn't get past the first round, obviously losing to the Warriors this past year in 7 games, excuse me. And now they only have to give up Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green and the 10th pick, which is kind of a luxury at this point for them anyway, with the amount of young players they had. The Suns don't even get back either Jabari Smith Jr. or Tari Eason. I always felt like Tari Eason was more of a long shot because I feel like Houston really values him as a defense first forward who can is just a really promising player that I'm really high on. I thought Jabari Smith Jr. would be a player they could part with in this trade just because him and KD at this point have I wouldn't say similar, overly similar play styles, but they're both big forwards who are good shooters. KD can obviously do a lot more. But I thought Jabari Smith Jr. would be a guy that Houston might be willing to part with, but they didn't really even have to. And they didn't even have to give up a guy like Cam Whitmore, who they don't seem to like a ton. Got another one of their former or recent first round picks. I never really thought they were going to give up Reed Shepard in a deal like this, but it just they really did. It's a no brainer for Houston, honestly. But from the Phoenix's perspective, it's just really underwhelming because you don't really get any long term cap relief from this because Jalen Green is still on a bad contract for the next couple of years at like 33 to 35 million, I think. And Dylan Brooks is making over $20 million a year for the next I think 2 years he has left. Maybe it's 3. I don't exactly remember his contract situation, but it's not like it's a clearing of the books for Phoenix, who's obviously been a second apron team in the past couple of years, really since they traded for Bradley Beal. And it's just a disappointing end to the Kevin Durant era in Phoenix overall, I think is the only really way to describe it because there was obviously, I think, a lot of optimism and excitement when KD came to Phoenix a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now. They lost to the Nuggets in the second round in 6 games in 2023. As Denver, what was on Denver's path to their championship run that year. Last year, they got swept by the Wolves after trading for Bradley Beal in the offseason and really pot committing themselves to the trio of Devin Booker, KD, and Beal. They were swept in kind of embarrassing fashion with Anthony Edwards doing the DMX celebration as they completed the sweep in Phoenix. And this year they missed the play-in. They was just a disaster season. Mike Budenholzer was fired after just 1 year, after Frank Vogel was fired after just 1 year, after Monty Williams was fired after they lost to the Nuggets. So this Matt Ishbia era in Phoenix has just been a disaster so far, to be honest. Like this team, as every episode where we talk about the Suns, I have the intro video at the top from Game 2 against the Bucks in the 2021 NBA Finals, and that was just 4 years ago. That this team was with two wins away from winning their first ever NBA championship. And if anybody remembers that series very closely, there was that epic Game 5 where Phoenix had the chance to take the lead in the last 15 seconds, and there's that unforgettable play where Drew Holiday strips Devin Booker and then throws the and one alley-oop to Giannis Antetokounmpo at the other end, as Milwaukee kind of stole Game 5 in Phoenix and then closed it out back home in Game 6. So that's how far this team has fallen in just about 4 years, because I'll get to this a little bit later when I talk about the Devin Booker situation and kind of where they go from here. But the KD era was just a massive disappointment, despite him not really dropping off as a player and providing a lot of fun moments and a lot of production as still one of the 15 to 20 best players in this league, I would argue. But you just look at everything that Phoenix had to give up to get him, which was Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and 4 unprotected first round picks. Mikal Bridges ended up going for 5 first-round picks himself when Brooklyn traded him to the Knicks last year. And Cam Johnson, who is still in Brooklyn, there was reports around the trade deadline this year that other teams were offering 2 first-round picks for him. So that's, I think, over 10 first-round picks in terms of players and the picks that the Suns sent out for Kevin Durant. And all that really resulted was in a 1 second round appearance in which they were tied 2-2 with the Nuggets, at one point, but then lost Game 6 and the series in embarrassing fashion as well. So, and now all they get back for is one of their own picks, which they sent out for KD, which is the number 10 pick this year. A bad player relative to his contract in Jalen Green, a player who I just do not think that highly of and don't think is going to magically mature into this really promising two-way scoring guard that he was projected to be out of high school and the G League Ignite, and a decent player in Dylan Brooks, who I don't know how much he makes sense with Phoenix next year with a roster right now that does not really feel like it's going to compete at all for even the play-in. Like, it just feels like they're automatically in that bottom group of teams in the bottom of the Western Conference, which keeps getting better and better and better when teams like Houston, who was the number 2 seed this past year, add a player like Kevin Durant. The Spurs get the number 2 pick, and which will likely be Dylan Harper, and Portland could always improve, and we'll see what Utah does. Obviously, that's something we'll talk about a lot on this podcast, but it just feels like Phoenix is in a really, really rough spot. And that kind of leads me to my next thing that I want to talk about, which is who they should target at number 10 overall, because they have to nail this pick. It is not like, if they do not nail this pick the rest of the decade, it could already be a disaster, but it's going to be even worse. And Devin Booker wanting to ask out, that becomes more and more likely if you don't hit on this pick. And the number one option I feel like Houston should, or the Suns, should target at number 10, should he fall that far, and I don't think he's going to, is Kaman Malawach, because I do think that I do think that he is I think I have him at number 6 on my board. I'm going to pull this up here in a second, pull up my big board that I updated this today, actually, because I wanted to, it's been kind of updating a little bit, but I've had Kaman Malawach at number 6 on my big board for a while. And obviously with big men like him, he could easily fall, I think. And if he's there at number 10, I think that's a no-brainer for Phoenix as your future anchor on defense, and a guy who I think has some defensive upside and would be a great pick and roll partner for Devin Booker and the many, many other shooting guards and on-ball guards that Phoenix has right now. We might as well call them the Phoenix shooting guards at this point. But Kaman Malawach is a guy that I would run to the podium if he's still on the board there at number 10. So the other guy I think would be interesting is Carter Bryant, who we talked about the other day with Eric Ruby, who I have at number 9 on my board. Obviously, Suns fans know him well as an Arizona Wildcat who was a freshman last year, who, despite projecting as a 3-and-D player, is still young as a guy who I think is only 19 years old. So I think he'd be really interesting for Phoenix if he's there at number 10 as a guy who you're betting on as a quality player you're going to know is going to likely be a capable starter for years to come, who I think does have some offensive upside as well. I think he flashed that as well as a pick and roll ball handler, and he's a defensive playmaker as well. So there's other guys I think I would target if you're really buying into a star upside, but I think Carter Bryant would be a worthy pick for Phoenix as well. I know some people wouldn't love that pick, but I wouldn't be too bummed out for if I was a Suns fan and they end up with Carter Bryant number 10. But the two other guys I did want to mention was the guys I have at number 11 and 12 on my board. I'll start with Jeremiah Fears, point guard from Oklahoma, one of the youngest players. He might, if not the youngest player in the draft. We talked about him a lot. Troy Finnegan and I did on the big board episode we did a couple weeks ago, talking about his fit with Utah. But I think now that Phoenix is looking to take a star bet at number 10, I think Jeremiah Fears is definitely a guy worthy of that as a elite rim pressure guard, point guard who I know some people have some size concerns, but I think he I do like the frame, and I think he's got some defensive potential as well. It's all about the shot for him and the jumper coming around, especially from three. But he is just an elite player at getting downhill and putting pressure on the rim. And if you buy his upside, which I kind of do, but also I'm still a little bit, I would still be a little bit skeptical. He's another guy I think would be a worthy target at number 10. And then I mentioned Derek Queen as the last guy. And I would throw Kasparas Shakachonis into this category as well. As now that I'm looking at my big board, the guy I have at 13, the point guard from Illinois, who is a little bit has got good size for a point guard, but another guy that you kind of worry about the shot developing as well. But Derek Queen, if we're looking at big men, would be another interesting piece for the Suns if they're able to add him, as if you buy his upside as a guy that could potentially run an offense at some point throughout his career. The defensive questions are obviously there, and that would not be great for Phoenix in the immediate in the for them next season and under Jordan Knopp. But he would be an interesting guy if you kind of buy his upside to kind of build around as well. So those are the 4 or 5 guys, I guess, that I would consider at number 10 if I was Phoenix. But Kaman Walamach, I think, is the clear guy. I mean, Ace Bailey, if he somehow drops to 10, I've dropped him below Colin Murray Boyles. I have him at 8 right now. If he somehow falls to 10 and Phoenix wants to take a swing, I think that's a perfectly rational pick, even if I don't love the player. But then, at number 29 as well, which Phoenix still has, some of these guys that Eric and Ruby and I talked about the other day. I think Ryan Kalkbrenner, who I have at number 23, who, if Phoenix does not get a center at number 10, I think he would be a great pick if he's somehow on the board at number 29. But that's some other players who are less of a positional need, I should say. Walter Clayton from Florida, who I have at 18, and I don't see him falling. I'm not sure if any of these guys are going to be on the board at number 29, but if any of them are, I think they would be worthy selections. But Walter Clayton is another guy I think Phoenix would consider or should definitely consider if he's on the board at number 29. Obviously, the star guard from Florida, the national champs from this past year, would be a fun player to put at point guard alongside the many shooting guards that Phoenix has right now. Jace Richardson as well, who I have at 19. I guess it would kind of be more of a meme pick than anything, given his Michigan State ties and all of the Michigan State additions that Matt Ishby has made since taking over in Phoenix, including Jordan Knott, who got his master's degree at MSU. He would be, but I think if he falls all the way to 29, I think that's a worthy bet for them as well. And then the other guy I wanted to mention was from Arkansas, Adu Thiero, a really big wing who I really buy the two-way upside there for him. He really came on strong, I felt like, at the end of last season, and was a key player for Arkansas as they made the Sweet 16 this past year under John Calipari. So those are 4 guys I would consider at 29 as well. For Phoenix, because I think it's not just about hitting at number 10. It's about not finding a star at 29. Obviously, that's a dream scenario for any team that's picking at number 29. But you're trying to find any player that can be an impact rotation player either now or in the future, and a guy that that you just kind of can rely on as part of a core going forward, even if it's not a star player, like I said. So a couple more things before I get out of here, because I do want to get this up and get this out, because the news is always moving pretty quickly at this time. But next, the next thing for the Suns to figure out is what they're going to do with Bradley Beal, because as John Gambadero has reported down in Phoenix, one of the best, easily the most plugged in guy to what's going on with the Suns organization. He said on Kevin O'Connor's podcast earlier today, I saw that he said that Bradley Beal will not be back with Phoenix under any circumstance next year, which we'll see how true that is. But he says either a trade or a buyout is likely coming for Bradley Beal, which I would likely pick the latter option there. I don't think a trade of any kind, unless you're using the number 10 pick to get off Bradley Beal, which that might not even be enough to a team with cap space, or if you're even taking back somebody else's gigantic salary. I just don't see how that's realistic at this point. And it would likely be a buyout, which I know John Voida on Bright Side of the Sun kind of laid out a case for that pretty recently, about if they're able to get Bradley Beal to agree to what is I think he suggested like a $66 million buyout that they could spread out either over the next 2 seasons, or they could somehow stretch that over the next 5 years and really lower the cap hit, because they're not able to waive and stretch Bradley Beal. He would have to agree to a buyout, and then go sign somewhere else, because he is due, I think it's $110 million over the final 2 years of his contract with Phoenix. And he's obviously not really been willing to waive his no trade clause, which is still a factor, which would be a factor as well in a trade that I don't see as likely at all. But if the Suns are somehow able to get him to agree to a buyout, say in that $60 to $70 million range, then he could go sign a contract with somebody else that either has cap space or has the mid-level, and a team that feels like he can still make an impact at this point of his career, which I'm skeptical of as well. But he might just collect the $110 million he's got left on his contract and have that kind of ride and maybe be a minimum guy after that. We'll see. I really do not know what's about to happen over the next 2 years of Bradley Beal, but that's an obvious decision that is looming for Phoenix here is how they're going to use Bradley Beal if he's somehow still on the roster in October, or how they're going to get rid of him and try to alleviate the financial burden that he is going to cause them for at least the next 2 years and potentially longer, if they're able to get a buyout and stretch that out. So there's obviously that as well. And then the final thing I wanted to hit on was Devin Booker, because it has been very clear that Phoenix does not want to trade him, and he has made it clear that he doesn't really have a desire to leave at this point. But if they are the 13th seed in the West again next season and they don't control their pick, that their pick next year will likely go to Memphis as part of the recent Desmond Bane trade from Orlando. The Suns, I think, will have a pick, or they don't think they'll have a pick at all next year. Or if they do have a pick, I think it'll be at the very end of the first round, like this year where they had the 29th pick. So there, which was Cleveland's pick. So if they're not able to, if they don't have a first round pick next year, and they're really bad, like, I just don't really know how that is satisfying to Devin Booker, unless he just loves living in the Valley and wants to be a Sun for life, which props to him. I mean, Eric Ruby made the point the other day that he's going into his 11th season this year, and it's his 8th different head coach. Granted, they made the finals once and they got really close to making a title, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, but the rest of that has been a lot of bad basketball that Devin Booker has been a part of. And I don't know, there's really only so much of that super elite players that and players in the category that I think of Devin Booker to be in. There's only so much of bad basketball that those guys can usually stomach. So we'll see if another bad season in Phoenix, another disaster season, prompts him to ask out at some point next year, and maybe then they are able to kind of escape this era where they're in the first and second apron and they don't have draft picks. That would be their one real escape clause, or escape pod from this disaster rest of the decade that feels like it's looming for them. So and maybe he's traded to the Rockets at some point next year, because like we talked about 10-15 minutes ago, the Rockets kept a lot of their powder dry and still have a lot of young players and assets to move if Devin Booker did ever become available, which it seemed like he was the guy that Houston was really interested in trying to get from Phoenix. Not Kevin Durant, but obviously Devin Booker isn't going anywhere this summer, and they did settle on adding KD. But I really do think we could be headed toward Devin Booker asking out in a year. I mean, obviously, like I've said, it seems like he's happy in Phoenix and wants to be a Sun for life. But let's ask him again in 12 months if they're in a very similar spot after a disappointing season where they don't even really compete for a play-in spot. And now we're looking at a point where it was less than a year ago, or not less than a year ago, just over a year ago, when Matt Ishbia made that very silly comment, which it was silly at the time, made the comment that 26 of the other, if you pulled the other 29 GMs in the league, 26 of them would swap spots with Phoenix. If you pulled the other 29 GMs in across the league today, I don't think any of them would want to swap spots with Phoenix. It's just that bad of a scenario down there. And it doesn't seem to be like it's going to get any better anytime soon with unless you're buying a lineup to have 5 shooting guards and how that's going to compete in the West, but I don't think really anybody is. So appreciate everybody tuning in today in the wake of the Kevin Durant news. Wanted to get the solo episode out because it is such a big move for Phoenix, and there's obviously a lot still to come this offseason, starting with the number 10 and 29 picks on Wednesday night in the draft, and we'll be back to cover all that on this podcast, as well as what Utah does. But before I wrap up, I just wanted to mention Dario Saric. Earlier today, it was reported that he will be picking up his $5.4 million player option next year with the Nuggets, which is very unsurprising given he's not getting that anywhere else because he didn't play at all really for Denver last year. He really fell out of favor with Michael Malone, and then David Adelman didn't play him at all in the postseason as well. So another on the margins move for Denver that has gone wrong, and that's another reason why Calvin Booth is no longer the GM of the Nuggets. So there's that, and I wanted to mention that, like I said earlier at the top, we'll have a podcast coming tomorrow morning on Utah, the Run It Utes, talking college hoops, and one of the interesting programs that we cover here on this podcast. Was happy to finally have a guest on to break down everything that's going on in Salt Lake City this offseason under new head coach Alex Jensen. And a pretty new look roster there for the Utes. So stay tuned for all that. And like I said, stay tuned for Wednesday night or Thursday morning / afternoon. We'll see when I get a podcast up after the draft, but we'll have full coverage from that as well. So once again, thanks everybody for watching on Spotify, as I'm posting all the video versions of this on Spotify as well. Or if you're listening on Spotify or an Apple or watching on YouTube, wherever you're listening, make sure to like the show, subscribe, rate, review, comment. All of that is super appreciated by me. And like I said, thanks again, everybody, for listening, and enjoy the NBA draft this week.